2020's back. Had a leaky belt box last year, so today we're gonna pull off the clutches and the belt box, and we're gonna seal that puppy up.
Yes.
No more slipping belt for us this year.
No. Needs to be done.
So we're gonna get started on pulling this belt box so that we can seal it. So the first thing we gotta do, wheels gotta come off, this snorkel tubing's gotta come off, and this frame strut's gotta come off so that we can get access to the belt. So there's 7 plastic pins that hold all of this in. Get yourself one of these off of Amazon. They're super cheap. They make pulling these plastic pins a lot easier. Down here on the bottom, there's 4 bolts. They're 10mm top and bottom. And once you have all of that off, this footwell, you just pop it out from the plastics and just keep working it out. And then you have access to this snorkel tube going to the top of the belt box that we'll need to take off to get access. So to get the snorkel off, it's a 5/16 on this side. You're just going to want to loosen that up. It's a little hard to get access from the side here, so hopefully it's rolled down. And over here on the other side, you have 2 joints right here, and this is a 1/4 inch. Once you have all that loosened up, you're just going to work it out of the rubber. Once you're out of that, you have the snorkel off. This is the lowest snorkel that you have down on the footwell. So if you're going to have water in your belt box, it's going to be in here. And there's usually some mud and clutch remnants built in there. So that's why we have some brake cleaner over here. So this is the RTV that we're going to use, the ultra black that we're going to seal the belt box with. A little bit of a glare on there, but ultra black. We have a primary clutch puller so that we can get behind the clutches, and two cans of brake cleaner, and we're going to clean the clutches and the entire belt housing to make sure that we're good. Yep. So for the frame strut, we just took off 4 15mm bolts. So once you have that off, you've got to take the top of your snorkel off, or the top of your belt box. So come over to this side. I got this loosened up, so you just work that off and come out on this side. There is 11 bolts holding the belt box on, the belt box cover on. For some of the bottom bolts, you need a long extension with a universal. They're all, what did you say this was, 10 mil? Yeah. 10 mils going all the way around. And now that you have all of that loose, you just gotta try to finesse this belt box cover off. So keep working it, and there you are. And there's your primary clutch, there's your secondary clutch. So we're going to pull this off, and then we're going to pull this interior cover off so that we can get behind it and reseal the belt box. So your clutches are going to want to free spin while you're trying to loosen it. So what we're doing here is we're taking off this bolt holding your primary clutch on. So it's a left-hand thread, so it's going to be opposite. And the clutches, with the clutches free spinning, you're going to need a bar or something to wedge into your clutches to keep it from spinning on you. So we just broke this one loose. So all you have to do is pull this out, and then we're going to insert our primary clutch puller, and we'll be able to pull this clutch directly off. So the primary clutch puller doesn't fit past the CV axle here. So what we did is we took the shock off, just the upper and lower here. He's got a 2-inch bracket lift, so we're just coming off of here. But if you don't have a lift, it's just going to be coming out of this position. So shock's off. So we're going to take the upper control arm and the lower control arm off so that we can pop this CV axle out, so we can fit our primary clutch puller and get this clutch off. So what we just did is we disconnected the upper control arm, 15mm. The shorter one is on the top. There's a longer one on the bottom for the lower control arm. I just put the bolts back in this way. The nut was facing the front of the machine. I don't know if it matters when you put it all back together, but that's the way it came off, so that's the way I'm going to put it back together. So now that we have the upper and lower control arms off, we disconnected this here. So as we're reefing on this CV axle, we're not going to put any stress on this brake line here. So I'll set these back into here, and we're going to pull the CV axle. So what we just did here is just had somebody brace the machine right here, grab onto the axle in the center, and pull straight out, and you'll have that out. Now that we have the CV axle out, we're going to take our primary clutch puller, which is a left-hand thread as well, and we're going to just start threading this into here. And as we start to thread it in, it'll actually pop this clutch out because this is tapered. This was about 114 bucks from Partzilla, but really good tool to have. Take back what I said on the other one. This is not a left-hand thread. This is just a standard thread for the clutch puller. So again, the clutches want a free spin. I just do this. So I just have another person here with a breaker bar holding this clutch so I don't move it. Had to go back and get a little bit of leverage. We had to move up to a 1/2 inch, so that's a 7/8. So what we just did is, once this is in, you'll hear an audible pop, and now this whole thing is loose. So we're gonna pull our primary clutch puller back out. And once we do that, we're gonna pull this off of the belt, and then we're gonna pull the secondary clutch. Oh, we're gonna have to.
There you go.
There we go. So as you can see, got a little bit of belt residue in there. So here's your primary clutch. You can see all the belt residue that we have going on in there. That's why we have the brake cleaner. Give these a nice good clean. This belt has a little bit of wear, but not too bad. So I think we're going to run one more season out of this and replace it next year. So now we're going to pull the secondary clutch, which is up here at the top. So what we did here is we popped this bolt out of the secondary clutch. It's a 5/8. So what we had to do here was a little bit strange. So we had a 5/8 down here on the bottom, wrenching on that, and then we came up here on the top, rotated the clutch until we could find this notch right here where it expands, and dropped a 1/2 inch ratchet in there to lock it in place from the bottom. So we had to work it exactly like this in order to get it off. We had to throw a impact on there just to put some vibration to loosen this up, because there's Loctite in this from the factory, and we'll put some Loctite when we put it back together, but it was kind of a pain to break. Now that we have that broken off, secondary clutch slides out and you can work it out. There's your secondary clutch. Again, you can see all of the residue on here, so we're going to clean all these up. You'll see what color it's supposed to be once we're done. So we just finished pulling all the nuts off of this. So there's 10 of them, and it's a T27 Torx bit. As you can see from the factory press, some of the washers came off and some of them didn't, so we're missing those washers. They're still on here. Once we have this belt box off, we'll be able to pop the washers actually out. So it was still partially sealed from the factory. So what we're gonna do is you gotta work this seal off. And so once you have all this, you can see where it's still attached, and we're gonna scrape all this off with a razor blade on this and reseal this entire thing. There's a groove in here that this is supposed to match up with, and we're gonna fill that entire seam all the way around here with that silicone. Break that off. And it's just a matter of working this out. So this is the inside of your interior belt box. You can see those washers that were left behind. They were on the side here. Those are the rest of the holes. So your secondary clutch typically sits like that. Primary clutch sits like that. And this belt box would be over the top. As you can tell, most of the dirt is sprayed on the inside of the bottom of the belt box. So that's why we're going to clean this entire thing and make sure that we're immaculate before we put it all back together. So what we're doing here is we're just cleaning off the factory RTV off the inside of the belt box. As you can see, pulling off all the big chunks, just making sure it's going to be a smooth connection for when we reseal that. As far as the actual transmission side, this is all filthy here, so we're going to clean all this with brake cleaner. And we're going through and scraping all the RTV off of this, just making the best factory seal that we can. As you can see over here, this is all clean coming around. Then it gets really dirty on this seal right here, so that's my guess of where this belt box is pulling water in. So what we're doing here is we're cleaning up the edge on this. We had some sandpaper that we used to clean up where this is going to reseal back to the transmission. Cleaning up this edge where the outside of the belt box is going to seal up, making sure that there's no gouges or anything on there, so it's going to be a good fit. under here, what we did is did a slight scrub with a 180 grit sandpaper, which we got here. Scraping all this up, used a flat razor blade to clean all of the previous RTV from the factory off of this. Sprayed the whole thing down with brake cleaner and just making sure that we have a real smooth edge all the way around this before we reseat this back in place. All right, so what we're gonna do here is we got an ultra black that we're gonna use. So this is gonna go in this seam all the way around the entire thing. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna run a thick bead through this entire thing. Not too thick, you don't want it splooshing out on either side. But as we get to each one of these holes where we're gonna be mounting this belt box back to the case, we're gonna wanna go 360 all the way around each one of these holes through the entire case. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna cut a little tip off of this. We're gonna apply this, we're gonna put the case on there, and then we'll pull the video back up when we're ready. All right, so what we just finished doing is we just finished setting a thick bead all the way around, and then I just came back with my finger and brushed around it, focusing on the holes where each one of these bolts are gonna be going back into, making sure that we have quite a bit, especially down here on the bottom, which I know where the culprit was. So we got one bead going all the way up and around. So this is one complete seal on one side. And now we're gonna take the interior belt box and put that back on and put all 10 of our T27s back in. All right, so what we just finished doing is after we had that bead of silicone all the way around, we put the belt box cover on, we put all 10 of our T27s back in. They are hand tight with one crank on a ratchet. We're gonna let that set for a little bit before we actually go in and crank those down, because we don't want to aggravate the RTV too much while we're cranking it back down. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our clutches and all this belt schmeg that's built up in here. We're gonna try and clean all that out. We're gonna do it to both the primary and the secondary over here and just try to get it as clean as we can. It's not supposed to be that color, so we'll do what we can. See all that's coming off. That's all belt in there. So what we're doing here is we're going back over each one of these on the interior belt box. We're going to put an extra crank on them, make sure all these are snug. Give that RTV a little bit of time to set before we crank them down. Just finished cleaning our clutches. They look significantly better. We got all the belt junk out of there. Belt still looks good, so we're getting ready to reinstall this stuff and put things back together. So just an overview of what we've done so far is we pulled the back left, as you can see, back left tire off. Right here, we pulled the footwell. We pulled the snorkel for the belt box extension snorkel. We have our frame strut. We pulled our shock and our CV axle out. Pulled our exterior belt cover off. We still have to clean that up. From there, we pulled our primary clutch, which is going to be a right-hand thread, and you need a left-hand thread with a primary clutch puller that's a standard thread. Your secondary clutch, which is a standard thread, and here's the bolt for the secondary clutch. And once we have all that, everything's cleaned, we seal the belt box, and we're going to start our reinstallation. Alright, so we just aligned the secondary clutch back in. Again, we have a socket kind of wedged into a ratchet wedged into the top here. We got our 5/8 cranking it down this way. So I just have somebody up the top bracing that so I can tighten that down. So this is all installed. So coming back up the top, that's kind of what we're wedging into. As you can see that right there is we're just setting a ratchet down in there just to keep this from free spinning while we're tightening it down. A little awkward, but it definitely works. So now we're gonna put the belt back on and put the primary in. All right, we haven't tightened it down yet, but we put the belt on the secondary. pressed it all the way down into the raceway so that we could get the distance that we needed. Took the primary clutch and set it down this way and slid it straight on. We took our primary clutch bolt, and keep in mind that this is still a left-hand thread. So we are braced down here so that this clutch doesn't spin. And now we are just tightening it into place. All right, so this is all torqued down. We're good to go here. So now, before we put the belt box cover back on, we're gonna do a test run, make sure that the clutches are engaging normally. Go ahead. All right, there's the primary. Everything looks good. Secondary clutch is engaging like it should. So now we are gonna grease up the belt box, the exterior belt box. So this seam right here that runs all the way around this, we have some industrial grease that is real thick stuff. And here's what we're gonna do. Can you come over here and hold the camera? So what we're gonna do
On the outside edge.
is we're gonna take this grease right here, we'll load it up on our finger, and we are gonna run a thick bead all the way around this. And this is what it's gonna do is it's gonna act as a water shield for anything coming in on the exterior of this belt box. And this is a lot better than using the ultra black RTV on this, because every time that you want to get access to your belt, change your belt, do any clutch work, you're gonna spend 3 hours of your life peeling off all of the RTV around this. So if we just use a thick grease, it's gonna be a lot easier. You're just gonna take a rag and clean that off, but it still acts as a good seal. All right, so what we just finished doing here is we took this industrial grease and we spread it on the outside of the belt box all the way around. Then we took a paper towel and ran it all along the inside here to make sure that we didn't have any grease on the inside, because we don't want any grease getting into our belt and causing it to slip. So once we have our exterior belt box, we're gonna press it onto here. This is gonna sploosh out the side. We're gonna wipe all that down. We're gonna mount all of this, and then we're gonna start putting everything back together, and this is how you seal up a belt box. All right, so we just finished putting on all 11 of our coarse thread belt box, the 10 millimeters that we took off originally. So as you can see, we have some grease
The 3/8
that are all the way around here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go and wipe all this excess grease off and just make sure that we're not gonna have anything hanging out on there. Once we are finished wiping off the grease, we are gonna put our CV axle back in and connect our upper and lower ball joint, upper and lower control arms, and then put the snorkel back on. All right, so a quick overview. We have the belt box cover back on. We have the snorkel on. We connected our upper control arm, our lower control arm. We put the shock back on. We put our brake caliper back on. So all we have left is our wheel well. That's gonna go back right here. I mean, our foot well. That's gonna go back right here. Put the tire on, 24 hours for that RTV to set, and then we're gonna be good for the season.